Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Alchemist Lounge. As always, this is your host, Alex Atwood, and we are here to discover alchemy and magic. And today we're going to take a bit of a journey with a very special guest. This is an incredibly dynamic woman who is mastering the art of weaving together threads from all sorts of different fields. We're talking business, we're talking culture, we're talking media, we're talking spirituality. She's here to bring her unique blend of alchemy to our lounge. Everyone, please meet Jasmine Pierce. Now, who's Jasmine? Well, she is, she's first of all a strategic leader in hospitality. She orchestrates really high profile events, lots of brands that you've heard of. She's behind a lot of that. She's the magic. And she's also a freelance writer. She has left her mark on publications like Ebony Magazine and Pop Sugar and the Zoe Report. I think that's how it's pronounced. But that's not all. She's the Zoe Report. I knew I screwed that up, but I like Zoe. I like Gorilla Zoe. That sounds a lot better than Zoe anyway. But that's not all. She's also co-creator of Black and Lit, which is a brand dedicated to amplifying the voices of the Black community. Amazing. So without further ado, I want to dive right in. And the first thing I want to get to, and what led us to connect initially, was One Heart Journeys, which is, if listeners haven't heard of this group, this is a group of type A personalities, I guess is how they sort of market themselves, that come together and transform and learn in a space with plant medicine. So my question is, what led you to connect with One Heart Journeys, and how did you first encounter the world of plant medicine?
Oh, that is a long, long story. I'll try to keep it short. But first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This is such an honor, and what a lovely introduction. Always so weird to hear about yourself from someone else, but thank you. It is really great to be here. But yes, we first connected with One Heart. I learned about One Heart, I believe, in 2020. A dear friend of mine who is a very well-known chef came back from a journey, and she was just glowing, and she talked so much about how much she grew and what an amazing experience it was. And I should preface this by saying I first learned about ayahuasca in my first year doing PR. I think it was my first or second year working at a PR agency. It was extremely stressful. I was doing the PR for the Mercer Hotel at the time. And one of the security guards, we became friends just from me being there doing photo shoots and interviews and things. And I'd often spend a lot of time waiting for people. And one day he was telling me all about this ayahuasca journey he did. And I'm like, what the hell is ayahuasca? And he's telling me about this trip he went to in Peru with a shaman in the jungle. And I remember just being so fascinated by this, and like it piqued my interest fully. But I was also like, there's no way on earth I'm going to a jungle and doing psychedelics as a woman by herself. Like that is just not my MO at all. But I liked the sound of it, and I liked seeing him. He was actually like lit up, like glowing, and it stuck with me. That was maybe like 2014. Fast forward to 2020. I'd hear about ayahuasca, but it just always felt so foreign. Like it didn't feel like something that I would or could actually do that, like in a safe way. So a dear friend of mine, brilliant chef, well-known television star, she comes back from this journey and tells me all about One Heart. And as silly as this sounds, I was like, okay, if she's doing it, if she's going in the jungle and she trusts this group, then I trust this group because
Mm.
I think there was a part of me that also felt like, as a type A control freak person, I'm like, what is this going to do to me? Am I going to lose my mind? Like I had experience with mushrooms. My spiritual journey actually started with shrooms had a bit of experience with LSD, but I one and done for me. That's all I needed. um, but I was, there was a bit of fear around it. And she introduced me to the group, and I met some of the founders over Zoom and had a really great discussion. And it felt like a place that I would feel safe having this experience. And it was also during a time where I was looking for deeper understanding of myself, of my path, of my career, of the habits that maybe I gained from my family, maybe I gained from my upbringing. There were a lot of things. I was already very deep on my spiritual journey, but I just felt like there was like a piece missing. And I sat on the One Heart invitation for a full year before I accepted it, just because I felt fear and trepidation. I wasn't sure if it was right for me. And thankfully, a friend of mine just so happened, we had a conversation while we were out, and he was like, I'll go with you. And so we went on this journey together in, I think that was fall 2021. And it completely changed my life and my career.
Wow.
In a nutshell. Told you it was a long story.
No, that was a perfectly succinct story. So where were you on your journey when you had the conversation with the chef? In other words, like, what were you doing for work, and what did your life look like that you saw the chef and she was being in a certain way that just like really gave you an impact? What was going on with you then?
I was working for a PR agency that was based in the South. So I had kind of blown up my life in a way a few years before that. I was living and working in New York in publishing and then PR for about 8.5 years, super burnt out, broke, just trying to figure out, like, is there a better way of living than this? This was in my late 20s. Later realized I was going through my Saturn return. If you're into astrology, you understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved down to DC, where I'm from, stayed with my parents in their basement for about 11 months, cried on arrival, thought my life was over. It turned out to be the best decision I ever made. So I took up an opportunity with a small PR agency that was building a office in DC. And I actually, during this time, had planned to evolve out of PR. I felt like maybe it wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wanted to maybe get back into publishing or events or something. I was just burnt out and done. But I also needed money. So I took this job. And what seemed like it was going to be an easy enough job actually became a really big undertaking in a positive way. I was able to help grow the DC office, grew a mentorship program there, really immersed myself in the town where I was from. And I hadn't spent any time there as an adult. So it was very fruitful, but it was unexpected. I was expecting to veer my career somewhere else, but the universe was like, we have other plans for you. So I ended up leading the DC office after about 3 years there, which again was not a part of my plan, but was a part of God's plan. And the pandemic happened, and I was feeling unsettled. I was feeling like maybe I needed more. I was unhappy. And I just had this nagging feeling, constant feeling that I wasn't where I was supposed to be, and that I was supposed to be somewhere else, and that, I needed to take control and take the reins and figure out what that thing is. And then that was around the time that my friend's name is Palak. Her name is Palak Patel. I should shout her out because she's fabulous. So Palak came to me about One Heart, and it kind of just clicked that I needed to experience this. It was almost like an instinctual knowing that was shrouded in fear. And that's how I knew I had to do it, because I was afraid to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you know what's interesting is you're telling me this is, so here you are, you had already come along, it sounds like pretty far in a career that people would deem successful, right? By the time you had that conversation with Palak and saw that calling, right? And yet there was so much unfulfilled there, right? So other people may look at you at that moment and say, you know what, this person's had, successful career, things are probably going well on the outside, right? But on the inside, it's like,
Yeah.
well, the money isn't necessarily right, and I don't feel like I'm fulfilled, and these things are there. So tell me from that point, you knew you had to do that. You were kind of feeling like stepping into the unknown. Is that
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
And and then I sat on the invite for an entire year before doing anything.
I got it. So it didn't
I'm
happen right
telling you,
away.
fear will keep you playing small if you let it. And one of the
Yeah,
biggest lessons I learned from the ayahuasca journey itself and leading up to it is that you have to follow your fear. You have to let your fear guide you, but you can't let it control you. And I've realized, and this has stuck with me over the past several years, anytime that I'm afraid to do something, that is my North Star. Like, I was afraid to do this podcast. I'm so used to being on the other side of the mic, asking the questions, like talking about myself makes me anxious. But I knew I had to do it. And I found that every single time I get over that hump of following where the fear is guiding me and just busting straight through it, there are so many blessings and lessons on the other side. It's just, you got to
it's
make yourself go through
exhilarating.
it.
Yes, it's
It really
exhilarating.
is.
Yes. So there you were. So you went on you go on this retreat, right? And like coming out of this, what were some of the first things that you did? Like what were some of the first actions that you did when you came back into the real world?
Ooh, that is that is a whole story. So I should say that between the time I got invited on the trip and started considering it, I actually decided to move back to New York. I took a job back with the agency that I initially worked with in New York. I went back to work with them. And again, for whatever reason, the timing that fall of 2021 felt right for me to go because I knew that I was following my instincts going back to New York and going back to this agency, but I still felt so unsettled. And a big part of my journey, we did three different ceremonies over 3 different days, and each one was completely different from the next. And I think after the second one, I was like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to do this again. But I'm so grateful that I did the third because you truly gain so much from completing the entire program. But one of the biggest lessons that truly changed my life and my career, I'm going to tell a little story. Hopefully, I can make it succinct.
Bring it on.
But I was having this during my very first journey. Didn't know what to expect, but I was kind of just like, let's get on the ride. Incredible, like drop down into the spirit world, like interacted with my spirit guides. It was beautiful. It was comforting. I'm just packaging this up. It's so much more, but it was truly just like a wonderful space to be in. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to leave here. Like, this is so great. My spirit guides are telling me that they've always been there for me, and they will always be there for me. And it was just pure love and pure joy. And then I had to go to the bathroom. I had to pee so badly. And I was like, I don't want to get up. I can't find the bathroom. I want to stay in this little bubble that I'm in right now. And if you've ever done ayahuasca, and I don't know if this is the same for everyone, but the natural world, the spiritual world for me was overlaid the natural world. So I could see both, but I was in the spiritual realm, but I could see the path before me. I could see my mat sort of under that. So I'm like, you know what? We're getting up. We're going on a trip to the bathroom. And so I make it there by some miracle. And as I'm walking back, I'm like, oh my God, I'm lost. I cannot find my mat. I can't see. I don't know where anything is. And I start to panic. And the shaman is like, if you need help, just call out help. Somebody will come. And I was like, I'm so embarrassed to call out help, but help. Like, I just screamed out help. And one of the One Heart guides comes, and I'm like, I can't find my mat. And he goes, well, there's an open mat right there. And I'm like, okay, thank God. Like, maybe it's it, maybe it's not. I'll just sit. Sat down, And I panic again. I'm like, oh my God, this is not my mat. Somebody's going to come. They're going to kick me out. I'm going to have to do this all over again. I am not where I'm supposed to be. I don't know what to do. Just like going through the motions. The grandmother, as clear as I'm talking to you, God, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call the source, clearly said, turn around. I turned around. All my stuff was there. It was my mat. I was exactly where I'm supposed to be. And again, the clearest download, just like a download of information, told me that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And you have to allow me to guide you, and you have to trust. You have to trust me. You have to trust yourself that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And at that moment, it was almost like my brain exploded into fractals. Like something unlocked in me where I was like, holy cannoli. Like I have been living my life in that same panic for so long. And I've been exactly where I'm supposed to be. And all I had to do was just sit down, relax, and trust. That shifted
Yeah.
my entire perspective. And that was one of many things of the journeys.
So just knowing that there wasn't anywhere to go or anything you needed to do, like you were just where you were was exactly where you were supposed to be.
And that is what I translated for my life and for my career. I always felt like I needed to be back in publishing. I needed to go back into broadcasting. I need to do this. I need to do that. Like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. This doesn't feel right. Like, all of that was unnecessary. All I had to do was just stand firm, trust, and understand that where I am is where I'm supposed to be, and that I'm being divinely guided if I would just allow it and get out of the way.
Yeah.
So that was the big lesson of my first ceremony, that I brought home with me. But the beautiful part, and to answer your first question, the beautiful part of my journey was that I realized that it wasn't only for me, that it was also for my family and for my lineage. And I think this was my second ceremony. I clearly saw the trauma that had been passed down my maternal line and the trauma that had been passed down my paternal line. And it's very hard for me to explain it in words, but the trauma looked like thick, dark, black roots. And I could see each generation as like levels. And again, it was almost a knowing, it was a download and understanding of what those traumas were. And just to scratch the surface, on my maternal line, it was the trauma of self-love and self-abandonment, lack of self-love and self-abandonment. And on my paternal side, it was abandonment, like just pure abandonment from parentals in each generation. And this was, and I hope they feel it's okay that I share this on a public platform, but it was incredibly powerful. The Holy Spirit, spirit guides, ancestors clearly told me that there is a sickness in my family on the paternal line, and that I have to help my brothers see the way. I have 7 half siblings, but specifically they were talking about my 2 younger brothers who are closer in age to me. And the spirit said, you have neglected them and they need you, and they need you to teach them how to love themselves. And I remember having a clear conversation being like, how am I qualified to teach them how to love themselves? I literally cannot do this. I don't know how you think I can. And they said, teach them by example, bring them under your wing. And it, as clear as I'm talking to you, they said, it is a matter of life and death. You have to take this seriously. You have to connect with them and teach them how to love themselves. And it was almost like seeing 100 years worth of trauma and happenings and fear and abandonment all at once, and having an understanding of why my father is how he is, why I am how I am, why my brothers are how they are, and what I needed to do. And so, long story short, I got home. I went straight from the ashram to my family's house in DC. I was still living in New York at the time. And I texted my brothers from the plane. I was like, what are you guys doing tomorrow? Do you want to get lunch? Lunch is on me. We go to lunch the next day. I didn't tell my family I did ayahuasca. I guess they'll find out now. But I told them I went on a meditation retreat, which essentially it was. And so my brothers and I are eating lunch and again had a download and it said, tell them what you experienced. I initially wasn't going to. And I told my brother what I experienced and what I heard from the ancestors. And he starts crying. And my brother is, at the time, he was 28, 27 or 28, not at all a crier at all. It's not normal. We're in a public restaurant. And he said, all of this time, I had no way of explaining how I felt. And you just said it all. You said it. How he felt about his relationship with our father, how he felt about himself. And it was this beautiful moment of connection and breakthrough. And guess who walks into the restaurant 10 minutes later?
Your father.
Our father.
Wow.
He goes, I heard you guys were here and I wanted to surprise you. Alex, that does not happen.
Wow.
Like, my father doesn't just surprise people. Like, it made absolutely zero sense, but I knew in that moment it was divine. It was divine intervention, and it was a gift from God for us. We ended up staying at that restaurant for 3 hours. It was therapy. We're all crying. There was some yelling, like people got defensive, but we were able to just talk about so much. And it changed the relationship between my father and my brothers. It made me and my brothers closer. It made me understand myself, my father deeper. It's had so many ripple effects that I can't even begin to speak about, but all from me actually listening to the call and doing it immediately when I came back.
Yes.
My brother texted me the day after and was like, sis, I just want to thank you for real. I feel like I had a breakthrough. And I literally started crying like into my phone just because I couldn't believe how quickly the medicine worked in a way that I never even knew that I needed. I didn't go on this journey to heal my family. That wasn't even one of my intentions because I didn't know it needed that, you know?
Yeah.
It gives you what you need, not what you want.
Well, you are the medicine. And what I really heard there was a couple of things. So you hear a lot about family trauma and difficulties within the family and difficulties in human relationships in general. And a lot of it, the thought is, well, over time, it takes time. You know, you have to think through things. You have to consider all sorts of different outcomes. But coming out of ayahuasca, one conversation in a restaurant with some alchemy can change everything. One night sitting and getting insight can change everything. So, and you know, now that I think about that, for people that I know that have had addictions, and we're talking maybe addiction to nicotine or cigarettes or something like that, it's always a long process and then an action. And at that moment, something changes, you know? And so there's just so much power in the moment. And in doing what you did in that moment, completely transformed, clearly, relationships, but it's now on a path to healing what sounds like generational trauma. So that's really profound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really was.
Wow.
It made that one thing made the entire experience worth it for me. I mean, it was already well worth it, but I didn't know that that's what I was really there for. And I know in my soul that will have ripple effects on our family for future generations. Like it's a puzzle piece that got unlocked or like put into place to change the trajectory of how our family grows And I mean,
Yeah.
we are a family that has a lot of love in it. I mean, we're all obsessed with each other, but every family has their issues. And there were so many that I didn't truly understand were actual issues, or so many things about myself that I didn't understand weren't my own, that they were actually passed down. Um, it's really profound, really.
Big time.
I came away from the experience thinking how different the world would be if everyone had access to this. If if you're going through depression or you are going through a transition and you had affordable access to plant medicine, the world would be a completely different place. I mean,
Yeah.
oh,
It's on the
yeah,
way. Fingers crossed.
yeah. Fingers crossed. It is
Yeah.
an exciting time for the world of plant
Definitely.
medicine, I will say.
Oh man, yeah. And yeah, now I'm curious about like in terms of your business career and your things outside of that massive monumental moment. Like how did this whole experience influence your approach to that, to your PR work and to your communications work and everything outside of that?
Well, I mean, first, as I said, it changed the way that I look at my job and at my career. And while I've always known that I'm good at what I do, I think I had a lot of resistance, a lot of energetic resistance that held me back from my true potential. Um, Granted, I continued to grow and evolve and get promotions, but after the ayahuasca journey and after sort of taking this load that I was carrying and just like leaning into what I was doing, and it caused me to bring more joy into my day-to-day work. And I swear, in turn, I got better clients. I almost like manifested better clients. Like I have the opportunity to work with really good people that are doing like good things for the world. And a lot of times in hospitality work, you don't get that. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, I love the hospitality industry. It's, I fell in love with it moonlighting when I was in my early 20s, but it's not quite often that you work with people who aren't motivated by money, but they're motivated by making the world a better place and improving the lives of the people in the communities surrounding whatever business they're operating. And by some miracle, I actually have a handful of clients on my roster, and I truly think that it's all divine. Like it sort of energetically opened me up to attracting better people into my life.
Mm.
Um, and knowing when to say no to people that might not be best for me in my
Mm.
roster.
Yeah. Like a change in the frequency has been like I think your frequency
Completely.
has gone to a different channel and now you can tune into those on that particular channel. But the thing is, so you've clearly always been
Completely.
somebody who's been able to connect into like the collective, right? Just in the work that you do, right? It requires
Hmm.
you to be able to have
Yeah.
sort of a global listening to what's happening in the collective, be able to articulate things in a certain way, be able to generate awareness. So that's a very strong superpower to have now that you've combined it with this other set of awareness. I'm curious about Black and Lit. I want to hear more about like the genesis of that and like and what was your first like where did you first decide to influence culture like with this platform?
That's such a great question. So I should preface this by saying that Black and Lit was kind of put on indefinite hiatus during the pandemic, and
Mm,
um, it's sad, it's unfortunate, but it definitely served a purpose for a few years, and we did a lot of work that we're super proud of. But essentially, Black and Lit was initially founded by a dear friend of mine, Priscilla Ward, who is a brilliant writer. She was working at BET at the time, and they had their Black and Lit list, which was like their answer to Forbes 30 under 30. And so they would do an
mm,
event celebrating this list. And Priscilla sort of took on the brand as her own, essentially after leaving. And we both moved down to DC in 2017 from New York. We're both from DC. And one day we were sort of sitting in the park, and I'd been back in DC for maybe about 4 months, and I felt that I was lacking the community that I had in New York. There weren't fun parties and events like I had in New York. There was just something that was missing that I did not have. And I just randomly said to her, we should bring your Black and Lit party to DC. And so we decided to partner on sort of a new version of what she started with Black and Lit, turned it into this event series that just completely snowballed. We did our first event was August 2021. We thought maybe like 10 people would show up. I mean, it was like 50 people in like the backyard of Hill Prince in DC. And so many people were like, DC needs this. I met so many people, like, you guys got to keep doing this. So we ended up making it a monthly series. It kind of evolved from, we would do like mixers, cocktail parties, food experiences. We also did artist spotlights. So we would offer a platform for up and coming and well-known artists to share their work, painters, musicians, photographers. And then we got an offer to have a podcast. This was when the Line Hotel had full service radio before the pandemic, but we had 2 seasons of our podcast. And that was born from an editorial series that we started alongside Black and Lit called How'd You Get That Life? And which was basically like how I built this, but for creatives of color who maybe aren't necessarily at the pinnacle of their industry yet, but they're here, they're grinding, they've made a name for themselves. And that was such a fun time in our lives, truly. Like, we really made an impact on the culture in DC at the time. And I mean, it trickled farther outside of DC. We had people from New York coming to our events, from Virginia, from Atlanta, and we were really getting our footing and getting things, getting momentum going. We had some really great partnerships with Shea Moisture and Illegal Mescal, but then we had to take a pause because the world took a pause, and that's okay. And I think we realized that that's exactly what we needed, and that's exactly what our community needed during that period of 3 years. And if that was it, that was it. We'll let it be. We've had a lot of people ask us if we are going to bring it back. We've talked with some people that own hotels that want to do a Black and Lit series. So you might hear us doing something new. It might have another name because I feel like, Black and Lit was us back in the day, and we got to figure out who we are now. But until then, the memories of Black and Lit still remain. I think we created something really special that we're super proud of.
Yeah. And now with your newfound insight, and imagine what a new Black and Lit would look like today, right? I mean, there's so much profound insight that you have gained in the past couple of years. I can imagine how your interviews would change. Possibly the nature of those interviews would change. So maybe the DC community needs more of this. And I will also assert that, first of all, hospitality is a very unique industry to be in, for sure. It takes a certain type of person that can be in constant service to others in a way that really, in a lot of ways, is very kind of showy. But at the same time, it really does set an immersive experience, like going into a particular hotel or an event and seeing the detail that's put into every aspect of the lighting and, plants in a certain area and sound in a certain area. I see that as being such a creative endeavor, and so much art is necessary in order to do that. And coming, I have a hospitality background myself. So the people that do that are the people that also lead very stressful lives. I was told recently about this thing called the Burnt Chef Project, and I'm going to be interviewing the founder of that project. But it really serves the community of chefs that are frankly, I don't know the exact stats, so I don't want to put out bad data, but their mortality rates are pretty dreadful, and the level of alcoholism and addiction in that career and the level of stress that goes into that career. And if you take that across the industry in general, you have a lot of people that work themselves and burn themselves out and probably find themselves in positions where they could not only be unfulfilled, but be unhealthy. So bringing, this new insight to this industry of really great people. I mean, the people in the industry are awesome. And being able to have them access to that is awesome. Yeah, right? So see what I'm trying to do here, Jasmine. I'm trying to plant some seeds.
I totally agree with you. I hear you. And I mean, I fully agree. I mean, that's why I fell in love with this industry. Like, hospitality is storytelling at its core. I mean, for me, running a restaurant was like theater. Like, every single night, I am offering people this experience that they're going to remember, and, an experience that's going to bring them joy and make them happy. And I think a big part of why a lot of people in hospitality are overworked and suffer from addiction issues is because secretly we're all people pleasers. Like, we are in this industry because we want to make people happy. And that comes, at a cost. Like, we sacrifice ourselves for other people to have this beautiful experience. And I still do. Like, that's my life in a nutshell. And I think I definitely live a much healthier life than I did when I was actually working in hospitality, but I'm still in hospitality adjacent. But at the end of the day, like, we are all theatrical storytellers who are addicted to making people happy.
Yes.
And there has to be a balance. There really does. And there's a lot of organizations, like my friend Steve Palmer down in Charleston is his organization Ben's Friends is a big support for people in hospitality who are suffering from addiction issues. There's a group called Focus on Health that supports the bar community, to live healthier lives. I think the seed has been planted, and it's germinating and it's growing, and I'm so happy to see where the industry is now. So many people I know in the industry don't even drink anymore, which I think is a beautiful thing. I mean, I love a glass of wine like the next person, but I can see the effects of alcohol on myself, my friends, former teammates, and just seeing how collectively our relationship with alcohol is shifting, I think, is a sign of things to come. I do believe that the hospitality industry is on its way to being a healthier, people-pleasing industry.
Yeah. And there's alternatives to alcohol. What's the name of that water brand that's popular now? I actually met one of the investors at Summit at Sea.
Liquid Death.
There you go. Liquid Death. Yes.
Liquid
can't
Death.
believe it. Yeah, I can't believe I forget. He'll kill me. But Liquid Death. And when I first saw that bottle, I mean the can, I said, what's that about? It's clearly just your marketing. I didn't even realize that until he told me that is an alternative to alcohol. And it's brilliant because I personally, I'm not against drinking. I won't say that I don't drink, but I like the idea. I like sort of the taste, the sort of bitter taste of lime and that whole deal. Right. And that gives you that without the alcohol. So there's a bona fide industry showing up of alcohol alternatives. And I think it was Cava that I had. It wasn't the tastiest thing that I've ever had, but was it Cava, or there's some liquid. It was another One Harder that I went to his restaurant, and he gave me a few shots of this Cava, and he was hosting parties, like Cava parties. So anyway, it's really interesting.
Like Cava,
so people,
the wine. Or interesting.
Maybe it's not called Cava. I probably have to Google it and look at it. There's alternatives now.
Okay.
Here, I'm gonna Google this real quick. Hold on. I think it is called
Seedlip is a really popular one. Spirit Lip
is
another.
This is
no. I actually had the pleasure of working with them.
I get why you're making the connection. So I jumped from Liquid Death to Cava. So Cava's not a brand. Cava's a plant. Okay. And it's not illegal just yet, but yes, it's healthy. And so but it gives you like sort of an altered like a slightly altered state. Like it's a little bit healthier than alcohol. And
Interesting. How
yeah,
do you
so
ingest it?
you drink it. You drink it. But you drink
Oh,
it fast.
it's a
Yeah,
plant. You make it into a tea.
something like
I'm
that.
learning something new here.
Yes. Well, I learned like a month ago when I went there, but we were having a conversation about how we just don't drink. And he happened to run a bar and he said, well, I have kava. Like we have kava parties and kava, we serve kava shots. And I said, what is that? That sounds good. Kava to me sounded like something more creamy or coffee or something. It sounded like, that sounds like it could be tasty. It wasn't that. So,
Yeah.
but we did have kava and bone broth. So it was really healthy, but it was alternative.
Sounds up my alley.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
got to try this.
I like that we reference stories because stories matter, and your personal story that you just shared is extremely impactful. So I'm curious, because you're in the world of communication and articulating stories, and you mentioned the hospitality, even the immersive quality of hospitality is telling a story through visuals, through an experience. So how are you going to use the story that you have now to be able to shape what it is that you touch moving forward, whether it's hospitality, whether it's the communities that you're in, whether it's your family, like how are you going to use that story? I'm so curious.
That's a great question. I think at the core of that, and something that I've learned very recently, is that I have to be more willing and open to share. And it boils down to this idea of authenticity. And it's something in hindsight, I realized I had to grow into a more authentic person. I think I spent a lot of my life trying to conform to who I thought I needed to be to become successful, or, to move out of my small town in Southern Maryland. And, I grew up in a Black family from the South, and you don't just share your business with people. You have to keep a certain guard up for self-protection. Like, you never want someone to utilize any information that they have on you to take advantage of you or what have you. Like, this is just the way I was raised, and I think a lot of people can probably relate. But I found that vulnerability was the only way for me to truly grow into the person that I am now. And being vulnerable and sharing my story and sharing, the stories of my upbringing, the stories of my ayahuasca journeys, instead of looking so much inward and thinking that it's all about me and that I'm uncomfortable telling these stories, I've started to look more outward to see, like, how can my story help someone else. And that really is just what it boils down to, like leaning more into vulnerability and authenticity, and knowing that my story just isn't about me. My life just isn't about me. And, living a life that is less focused inward and more focused outward, that has completely changed just the way I live, the way I communicate, the way I interact with people. There was a time where I had, really bad social anxiety. And I would get so nervous talking to people, like face to face, and like wondering if I sound silly, or, if I say the right thing, or am I sweating? And what changed me, I can't remember what book it was, some book I was reading. I love a self-improvement book. But what changed my mindset about that is when I understood the second that you focus on the other person and get curious about who they are, is when your brain stops focusing on yourself. And that's how I was able to be a better communicator in my life, and more easily share my story going forward.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's incredible. Well, the world absolutely needs more of you sharing your story. You are in a position
Thank you.
to impact many communities, and those who are potentially not familiar with all the different paths that are available. And listening to you tell your story, I think opens up people's ideas and possibilities around what's there. And I think in these days, this age of Aquarius or whatever they call it that's happening, I think you're one of the torchbearers for your, not just your industry,
right.
but your line of work and all of that. And at the end of the day, I think,
For sure.
I know that we are all connected in a way that is extremely profound, and we're all the same life, the same entity, seeing things from just different perspectives, but it's all the same thing no matter what. Absolutely. And I think when I saw something where I think it was astronauts saying that when they see Earth from that perspective, they just realize it's one living life being, all of it, every single thing that's there. So you are epitomizing that and transforming your family and the industry and everything that you're doing. So
yeah,
thank you for coming on the show. I think your website's JasminePierce.com. Is that right?
JasmineLPierce.com.
JasmineLPierce.com.
Got to get that L in there.
You got to get that L. You got to get that L.
Yes.
This is incredible. We have to take more time to connect because I was very, very, very moved by what you have shared today. And so thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable on the podcast. Thank you for coming into the Alchemist Lounge. Thank
you for having me.
Yes, you are a perfect guest for our show. You've laid it all out on the table, and I couldn't thank you more.
I appreciate that. And thank you for creating a platform for people like me to share. I think you're doing the big work. So I appreciate you.
And I got the big mushroom behind me to back me up.
I love that. When you were just talking about, the astronauts seeing the Earth from afar, and I was instantly transported back to the very first time I ever did shrooms. And it was the most profound experience, and it kicked off my spiritual journey because I saw the Earth breathing in time with myself, and I understood that, oh wow, the Earth is a living, breathing thing, and I'm a part of it, and we are all the same.
That's it.
That was a life-changing moment for me. So thank you for bringing me back to that.
That's
that moment years ago.
You got it. This is perfect. We came all the way back to the beginning. We went all the way to the end, and we came all the way back to the beginning.
Full circle.
Awesome.